Imagine waking up 70,000 years ago, somewhere in East Africa. The morning air is already warm. Around you, families prepare for another day of gathering food, repairing tools, and avoiding predators. If you looked around the camp, one thing would probably surprise you. Almost everyone would have hair that looked remarkably similar: thick, dark, tightly curled. You wouldn't find perfectly straight hair flowing in the wind. You wouldn't see loose, beach-like waves. And no one would be arguing about which shampoo works best for frizz. Which raises an interesting question. If the earliest modern humans probably shared very similar hair, why does human hair look so different today? Why do some people have straight hair, others have loose waves, while others grow tight curls or coils? Why can two people living in the same city have completely different hair textures, even though they're both human? The answer isn't found in fashion, culture, or modern beauty trends. It begins with evolution. Hair might seem like a small detail, but for our ancestors, it was surprisingly important. Long before humans invented clothing, sunscreen, or air conditioning, the body had to solve one difficult problem. How do you protect the brain while keeping it from overheating? The human brain is incredibly sensitive to temperature. Even a small increase can affect how well it functions. And unlike many mammals, humans evolved to become endurance runners. Our ancestors often chased animals for hours under the African sun, until the exhausted prey simply collapsed from heat. Running for that long creates a problem. Your muscles generate heat, your brain generates heat. The sun adds even more. Without a way to release all that heat, the body would quickly become dangerous to itself. Humans solved much of this problem by sweating. Compared to almost every other mammal, humans sweat an extraordinary amount. Sweat evaporates from the skin, carrying heat away and cooling the body. It's one of the reasons humans became such successful long-distance runners. But the top of the head created a unique challenge. The scalp sits directly above the brain. It receives constant sunlight throughout the day. Completely exposing it would increase the amount of solar radiation reaching the skull. Covering it with thick, heavy hair could trap too much heat. Evolution needed a balance, and curly hair may have been one of its best solutions. At first glance, tightly curled hair seems like it would make someone hotter. After all, there's more volume, more texture, more hair standing away from the scalp. But surprisingly, research suggests the opposite may be true. Instead of lying flat against the skin, tightly curled hair creates tiny pockets of air between the hair and the scalp. These pockets reduce the amount of direct sunlight reaching the skin, while still allowing air to circulate. Think of it like standing beneath the shade of a tree. The leaves block much of the sunlight, but air can still move freely underneath. A thick helmet would trap heat. A tree provides shade without sealing everything in. Curly hair works in a surprisingly similar way. Several studies using thermal models have suggested that tightly curled hair reduces heat gained from sunlight while requiring less sweating to stay cool. For early humans living beneath intense equatorial sun, that could have been a valuable advantage. Of course, hair wasn't evolving alone. Skin color was changing, body shape was changing. Sweat glands became more efficient. Everything worked together. Evolution rarely changes one feature in isolation. Instead, entire systems gradually adapt over thousands of generations. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans remained in Africa, where tightly curled hair appears to have been extremely common. It wasn't because evolution preferred curls. It was because curls worked. Then, humanity began one of the greatest journeys in history. Small groups slowly left Africa. Some traveled into the Middle East. Others eventually reached Europe. Others continued east into Asia. Generation after generation, humans entered environments completely different from those their ancestors had known. The climate changed, the humidity changed, the temperature changed, the amount of sunlight changed. And so did the challenges facing the human body. Imagine leaving the scorching plains of East Africa and moving into regions with long winters, freezing winds, and months of cold weather. Keeping cool suddenly wasn't your biggest concern anymore. Keeping warm was. Natural selection doesn't care what trait helped your ancestors. It favors whatever works best now. Over thousands upon thousands of years, new genetic variations slowly appeared. Every baby is born carrying tiny mutations that neither parent possessed exactly. Most do nothing. Many disappear forever. But occasionally, one slightly changes how hair grows. Maybe the strand becomes a little rounder. Maybe it grows at a slightly different angle. Maybe the hair bends less. One mutation means almost nothing, but thousands of generations can change an entire population. One of the biggest factors determining hair texture is something surprisingly simple: the shape of the hair follicle. Every hair grows from a tiny pocket beneath your skin called a follicle. If that follicle is nearly perfectly round, the growing hair usually comes out straight. If it's slightly oval, the hair often becomes wavy. If it's much more curved or asymmetrical, the strand bends as it grows, producing curls or tight coils. The hair itself isn't deciding to curl. Its shape is being guided from the moment it begins growing beneath the skin. Even the cross-section of individual hairs differs. Straight hair tends to have a more circular shape. Curly hair often has a flatter or more elliptical shape. Tiny microscopic differences create enormous visible changes. Then, genes enter the story. Scientists have identified dozens of genes that influence hair texture. None acts alone. Instead, they work together like members of an orchestra. Some influence the structure of keratin, the protein that makes up hair. Others affect the shape of follicles. Others influence how quickly hair grows or how it twists while developing. One particularly interesting gene is called EDAR. A specific variation of this gene became especially common in East Asian populations thousands of years ago. Among several effects, it contributes to thicker, straighter hair in many people carrying that version. But EDAR isn't the straight hair gene. Human biology is almost never that simple. Hair texture is a classic example of a polygenic trait. That means many different genes all contribute a small piece of the final result. No single switch determines whether someone's hair becomes straight, wavy, or curly. Instead, countless genetic instructions combine to produce an enormous range of textures. And that's exactly what makes human hair so remarkably diverse. Of course, genes don't appear because evolution wants to create a particular hairstyle. Evolution has no stylist, no fashion magazine, no preference for curls, waves, or perfectly straight hair. It simply preserves variations that don't reduce an individual's chances of surviving and having children. Sometimes those variations even provide small advantages. Other times they spread largely by chance. That's one of the most fascinating parts of human evolution. Not every trait exists because it was designed to solve a problem. Sometimes a population becomes isolated for thousands of years. A rare mutation appears. The group remains relatively small. Over countless generations, that mutation slowly becomes common simply because descendants continue passing it on. Biologists call this genetic drift. Imagine placing 10 colored marbles into a bag. 6 are black, 4 are white. Now imagine randomly drawing only 3 marbles to start a new bag. Pure chance might leave you with mostly white marbles, even though black was originally more common. Repeat that process for thousands of generations, and populations can begin looking surprisingly different without any dramatic evolutionary pressure. Human history is full of these small genetic accidents. Migration separated populations. Mountains, deserts, oceans, and glaciers limited contact. Over time, each group accumulated its own collection of tiny genetic differences. Hair texture became one of them. But reality is even more complicated than simply labeling hair as straight, wavy, or curly. Human hair exists on a spectrum. Some people have perfectly straight hair that barely bends. Others have gentle waves that only appear when their hair grows longer. Some develop loose curls. Others have spring-like ringlets. Others have tightly coiled hair that forms intricate spirals. Scientists often divide hair into categories, but nature doesn't really care about categories. It prefers gradual transitions. That's why two siblings can inherit noticeably different hair textures from the same parents. Each child receives a unique combination of genetic instructions. It's like shuffling an enormous deck of cards. No two hands come out exactly the same. Even identical twins who share nearly identical DNA don't always have perfectly identical hair. One twin may develop slightly tighter curls. The other may have slightly thicker strands. Tiny differences during development inside the womb can influence the final result. Genes provide the blueprint. Development finishes the construction. Hormones also play an unexpected role. Many babies are born with hair that looks nothing like the hair they'll have as adults. A child with soft curls may eventually develop straighter hair during adolescence. Someone with straight childhood hair may suddenly notice waves appearing during puberty. Pregnancy can temporarily change hair texture. Hormonal changes sometimes make hair appear curlier, straighter, thicker, or thinner. The DNA hasn't changed. The body is simply reading those instructions a little differently. Age continues the story. As people grow older, hair follicles gradually become less efficient. Individual strands often become thinner. Some lose pigment and turn gray. Others change texture entirely. Many people notice that aging hair becomes coarser, drier, or more difficult to manage. The biology beneath the skin never stops changing. Climate also influences how hair behaves, even if it doesn't change your genes. Anyone with curly hair knows this firsthand. Walk outside on a humid day, and curls often become larger, softer, or frizzier. Visit an extremely dry climate, and those same curls may tighten or lose volume. Hair absorbs moisture from the surrounding air. That changes the way individual strands bend and interact with one another. It's one reason your hair can seem completely different while traveling to another country. The genetics stayed exactly the same, only the environment changed. Modern humans have also transformed hair in ways evolution never anticipated. We straighten naturally curly hair. We curl naturally straight hair. We bleach it, color it, relax it, perm it, add extensions, cut it into hundreds of different styles. Today, someone can completely change the appearance of their hair in a single afternoon. Yet underneath every hairstyle lies the same biological foundation our ancestors carried tens of thousands of years ago. Keratin. Hair follicles, genes, evolution. Perhaps the biggest misconception about hair texture is the idea that one type is somehow more natural than another. In reality, every natural hair texture is equally human. Straight hair isn't more advanced. Curly hair isn't more primitive. Wavy hair isn't somewhere in between. They're simply different outcomes produced by the same species adapting, migrating, mixing, and evolving across different parts of the world. And the story is still unfolding. Today, people travel more than ever before. Populations that were once separated by oceans now live side by side. Families increasingly have ancestors from multiple continents. As those genetic lineages continue mixing, future generations may display combinations of hair textures that become even more diverse than those we see today. Evolution didn't stop when civilization began. Genes continue moving through populations with every new generation. The world our descendants inherit may contain an even greater variety of hair than exists today. And perhaps that's the most remarkable part of this story. Hair texture isn't just about appearance. Every curl, every wave, every straight strand carries a tiny record of humanity's journey across the planet. It tells the story of ancestors who survived beneath the intense African sun, of families who crossed deserts and mountain ranges, of populations that adapted to tropical forests, frozen winters, coastal islands, and endless grasslands, of millions upon millions of children inheriting tiny genetic variations that slowly accumulated over thousands of years. No single generation noticed the changes. No one woke up one morning and discovered a completely new hair texture. Evolution almost never works that way. Instead, it moves quietly. One mutation, one generation, then another, Until, after enough time has passed, an entire population begins to look a little different from the one that came before. So, why do humans have different hair textures? Because our ancestors didn't all stay in the same place. They spread across the world. They encountered different environments. New mutations appeared. Some became common. Others disappeared forever. Genes mixed, populations changed, and over thousands of generations, humanity developed the extraordinary range of hair textures we see today. The next time you run your fingers through your hair, whether it's straight, wavy, curly, or tightly coiled, remember this. You're not just looking at a hairstyle, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of years of human history. A history shaped by migration, climate, chance, and evolution. Because every strand growing from your head is a small reminder that although humans may look incredibly different on the outside, every one of us shares the same ancient beginning.